What is going on, guys? It's the Mag Dragon. Welcome back to another preview video for the Six Nations 2022. This is, of course, where we chuck on a game of Rugby 22 in the background of the teams that are going to be playing. And then over the top, we talk about the official teams that have been announced that are going to be playing in this game, having a rundown of every player, who we think is going to do well, who we think is going to do badly, go over some of the team changes, and finally give a score prediction for the game and how we think it's all going to go. Italy versus Scotland is always a very fun match that goes on every year, so let's get this game kicked off and underway. Alrighty, Garbisi will get us kicked off. We'll start out to the right, a little bit too much power there, but at least we'll put the Scotland team back in there, 22, and hopefully have a bit of a good start here. So, Scotland versus Italy. This was the game that if you went back sort of, I don't know, 10 years ago, this used to be the sort of playoff to see who was going to end up being last in the Six Nations, and the growth that Scotland has shown over the last sort of decade or so really put Scotland now into some higher level teams. It's now a game that Scotland probably go in anticipating to try and win. It's still probably the game that Italy target the most, I would say, but Scotland are definitely improving far more. They're now competing year on year now. They're aiming for that third or fourth position, and there's no reason if they get their act together they couldn't be aiming a little bit higher. As we're talking about Scotland, let's talk about Scotland last week. Scotland last week, of course, played France and came away with a loss in that game. And to be honest, for most of that game, I was expecting France to win. There were a couple of bright sparks, like Rory Darge really standing out in that Scotland team, who came out of nowhere into the international scene and had a superb game. But France just looked dominating in most areas, and although Scotland had a couple of nice breaks, the ones that jumped to mind is the Duhan van der Merwe that broke through. There was the other one where the try went absolutely begging, where Hogg couldn't catch the pass that went out wide to him. It just didn't look like they were going to be able to break down that French defence for an actual win over that game, which was a shame for them. So they've now lost two on the bounce. They lost to Wales, which was unexpected for me, and they've gone on to lose against France. So going into this game, they certainly need to try and shift up a bit. They'll want to come away with a win in this game now. They'll also definitely be wanting to try and aim for that bonus point, just to be a little bit more respectful. They are getting away with some of these games with the losing bonus point, which is fine. Can keep you in contention. It's probably not going to allow you to win the Six Nations, but you can certainly end on a high finish. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see them aiming for a bonus point in this game. So let's have a look at the team that has been mentioned that is going to be playing against this France team. Starting off in this front row, Pierre Schoeman, George Turner and Xander Fagerson. This is beginning to be a bit more of a standard front row now for Scotland. They are interchanging the hooker every now and again just to try different methods out. But these are the three they seem to be pretty set on now. I've got to try and cast my mind back 2 weeks now to think about the scrums. I think France were winning the scrums, if I remember that correctly. I can't even remember now, but I think they were doing okay in the first half, and it began to fall off a little bit in that second half for Scotland. They certainly tried to give a bit of pushback, but I think maybe against the Italian team, they should be able to have a slightly better scrummaging setup. I like all three of the players, especially with some of the length that we saw Pierre Schoeman play not that long ago, playing a good sort of 70 minutes of a match. He's a big boy to play so much of a match, so hopefully they'll get on okay. In terms of the lock department, Sam Skinner and Grant Gilchrist there as a vice-captain this week, which is interesting. They do like their captain and their two vice-captains. That is a thing Scotland enjoy doing. Interesting to see Grant Gilchrist taken out over there. I'm not really sure his credentials in terms of a captaincy, but nice to see him there. They'll certainly find the lineouts against Italy probably easier than France. France's lineout is extremely good, so Scotland were struggling in a couple of areas to get involved with that French lineout a little bit. So the Italian one will be potentially more opportunistic for them. They certainly might be looking to kick it into touch a little bit more, just because they'll know they'll have a bit more dominance to that line-out. Sam Skinner and Grant Gilchrist, both every week actually doing an awful lot of work. They're sort of those players that go a little bit unnoticed unless you actually specifically look out for them. There's a lot of hard graft they do in every game. They don't make it into my team of the weeks, but everyone does seem to point out quite often actually how well they do in the game. And they're just not doing that standout thing that gets them in a team of the week, but they are putting in some hard graphs. So let's see both of them in there. And then in the back row, bit of a switch up here. Hamish Watson coming back from an injury, I believe, so he's moved back into that 7 shirt. Rory Darge, the star player from last week for me, is going to move into that 6 shirt, and Matt Fagerson is going in that 8 shirt. So there was a couple of mixing around. Was it Nick Haining that went out with an injury, or was it Magnus Bradbury? There was someone that had an injury, and then so there's been a couple of replacements here. So still no Jamie Ritchie, but in all honesty, Rory Darge offers something about the same as Jamie Ritchie, really. So it's nice to see him still in this team. I'm going to be really looking forward to see what he can do against a team like Italy, especially in terms of the breakdown, but also running with the ball in hand. He looked very, very confident. Very, very low caps, but he'll be making the most of this one. So hopefully he can have a good game. And I think the bolster of Hamish Watson and Matt Fagerson back in this side now will be a big, big push for this Scotland team. I think as a front eight, this is what Scotland want. This is pretty much their top 8, I would imagine. Maybe a couple of people might want one of the Gray brothers in terms of a lock department, but I think they're both doing okay. I think this is a strong 1-8, and I certainly think they'll be looking to try and take the game to Italy in this one. In the backs, we've got Ali Price and Finn Russell in that halfback partnership. This is the one we see every week. We did actually get treated to seeing Ali Price run a little bit more last week, which was nice. I do say it an awful lot about Ali Price. I think he's very good running with the ball in hand, but so many times he just does not look for the sniping run. So it'd be nice to see him open up a little bit more and try and do that. And then Finn Russell, we know how good he is with all of his nonsense crossfield kicks and chips over the top and delayed passes and everything else he can offer. I think against a team like Italy that tend to open up a bit more defensively is the game Finn Russell will be looking forward to the most. It's where he can probably exploit his talents a little bit more than other games. So be nice to see him. In the centre partnership, Sam Johnson and Chris Harris. So, Tuipulotu gets moved to the bench for this one, which it's an interesting call because I feel to me like Chris Harris is slowly getting better now in that terms of defensive capabilities now. Sam Johnson is... if you think of it almost like a Mario Kart sort of game, I have Sam Johnson to be sort of like he's half attack, half defence, and I think Chris Harris is slowly moving towards being more defensive than attacking against a team like Italy where you feel like you'd want to be full out attacking. I'm surprised they haven't kept Tuipulotu on for this one. I don't think Sam Johnson's a bad player by any means, but I think in terms of just all out attack and being able to break through tackles, I would probably side slightly more with Tuipulotu. I'm not sure if either him or Sam Johnson can also play 13. I've got a feeling Tuipulotu can actually play outside centre if he needs to. So maybe I would have liked to have seen Sam Johnson and Tuipulotu. Maybe they're thinking late stage games, 60, 65, 70 minutes. When that Italian backline begins to tire, that's the time you put Tuipulotu on. Not sure. Be interested to see how that one works out. And then in the back three, one switch up here. We have Kyle Stein coming on the left wing. Darcy Graham retains his right wing and Stuart Hogg in that fullback as the captain. Now, a couple of people might be wondering, what on earth is Kyle Stein doing in this team? Well, I believe that Duan van der Merwe on the weekend got himself a nice little ban from the next 3 games that he's going to be playing, which include Scotland games, international games. So, as far as I'm aware, I had a quick look at it last night, that he is not going to be in this game, and he might also be missing the game next week, I think. So there'll be no Duan van der Merwe. So Kyle Stein coming back in. I'm pretty sure there'll be a couple of people that don't really know a lot about Kyle Stein. We got to see Kyle Stein quite late on, I think, last year, probably the summer games or maybe towards the autumn games. And he's a very good player. He's very, very quick. He's certainly got a number of tries. I think did he get 3 tries on his debut? Kyle Stein, certainly a big try scorer. Certainly looks for the ball. It'll be interesting to see which winger they tend to favour more. Do they go with the new, inexperienced Kyle Stein? Do they go with a very experienced Darcy Graham, the tried and tested method? I think maybe putting Kyle Stein on that left wing is probably a good call. I think Darcy Graham will have his work cut out a little bit against Ioane. That'll be going on the Italian team in a minute. So I don't think that's a terrible move, but hopefully Kyle Stein gets to have a good game. He doesn't really get a lot of game time with, of course, Duan van der Merwe just dominating that left wing at the moment in that Scotland team. As we move towards the half-time whistle, of course, we'll slowly need to talk about the Scotland replacement. Starting off in this front row, we have Stuart McInally, Alan Dell, I've got that completely wrong, and WP Nell. Wow, a lot of people whose names rhyme with each other here. So, this is a slightly different shift from the teams we've seen in the past in the Six Nations. Alan Dell is not a name I know a great deal about. I'll have to keep an eye out for him during the game, actually, to see his impact on the game. Assume loosehead, but Pierre Schumann is doing so well in terms of loosehead that, it's hard to keep him out, to be honest. Stuart McInally and WP Nell, again, it's going to be that bolstering. I actually feel they'll keep this front row on a little bit longer than usual. You might even see the starting front row last 60 minutes just to wear down some of those Italian players, and then they'll come on later in the game. I can't imagine this will be a half-time sub. Maybe they will if there are enough tries up, if they've already got the bonus point or something by the first half. It's still a big ask. Italy is still playing well. No one's really scoring 4 tries against them in the first half, but I imagine it'll be a slightly later trade-off for some of those players. In the rest of the replacement forwards, we have Jamie Hodgson in the 19 shirt, and then Magnus Bradbury coming on in that 20. Will probably come on as a direct sub for Matt Fagerson, I imagine. I would imagine it'd be a direct sub. Hamish Watson tends to play a full game, and Rory Darge absolutely showed off he's happy to play a full game. So I think Matt Fagerson, you'll probably see a lot in that first half. Matt Fagerson running face first into a lot of players, slowly probably fatiguing himself a little bit, and then it's time to put Magnus Bradbury on in that second half. I don't think that's a bad move. Ben Vellacott is going to be the replacement scrum half. Adam Hastings Adam Hastings is back in. Did we see Adam Hastings last week? I can't remember. Adam Hastings is going to be the replacement fly half. I didn't read that before. And then Tui Pelotu in that replacement centre. So, in terms of coverage, this is good. Ben Vellacott, we're going to be nice to see a bit more from him. We haven't seen a great deal from Vellacott so far in this the Six Nations. Adam Hastings can cover, I think, he actually covers fly half centre and fullback. But of course, you'd probably be wanting to see him get in there in terms of the number 10 shirt when he comes on for that replacement. And then Tui Pelotu, like I said, normally an inside centre, but I believe he can do outside centre if really necessary. In terms of like injuries to the wing, I imagine if a winger got injured, you might see Adam Hastings slide into fullback and Hogg move to a wing, potentially. It'll be interesting to see how they get on there. But as a 1-23, this is a good Scotland team. I think they'll be a bit annoyed with how their games have gone over the course of the Six Nations so far. Having a really good game against England, managing to play really well in that game. Very underwhelming in the Wales game, I thought, and then just sort of got beaten by France. There wasn't really a lot to dive into for me personally. They just didn't look like they were quite grasping the same areas as France, so they'll be wanting to get a win from this game, absolutely, and I think putting on a strong team is probably the way to do it. Bounce back, bit of confidence going into your final week. They've got a tough game coming up next week as well, so hopefully they'll do well. Talking of which, we need to talk about the home team. That is going to be talking about Italy. Now, Italy last week had a very, very bizarre game, which I haven't really been able to touch on at all since the game has actually happened. So last week we got to see a 13-man Italy for a great majority of the game, trying to take on a very strong Ireland side, and it was such a weird setup, having one hooker go off injured and then the other one getting carded. No one really knew what was going on with that rule. It was a rule I didn't know, that you also had to get punished when you had uncontested scrums. But you know what? I actually think that Italy played okay. In all honesty, I know the scoreboard looks bad. Of course it will do. They were down to 13 men for like over an hour of a game. They're always going to concede a lot of points. It's also Italy versus Ireland, who were my favourites going into the Six Nations in terms of winning it. They were always going to concede a lot of points in that game. But in all honesty, playing an hour with 13 men and still not conceding as much as I thought. As soon as that red card happened, they went down to 13 men. I was genuinely expecting potentially a 70, 80 point game. I thought Ireland were going to just start walking through the lines. Italy would get really mad about it, get a little bit dishevelled. Hard to carry on and play a game like that. It sort of ruined the game for me personally. Didn't really enjoy watching it that much because it just felt like a bit of a walking exercise for Ireland. I can't imagine Italy learnt anything from that, bar how to sporadically throw your defence around. And I can't imagine Ireland learnt anything either. It's not very good to test your set plays on a team that's missing two people. That means you can just work a set play straight through any gap anywhere. And it began to actually have a bit of a knock-on effect for Ireland. They certainly messed up a couple of times, and I actually think Italy played well. So it's a sad result for them in the last game, but I think there's a lot of positives they will take away from that, especially in just terms of their general defence. Playing for that fuller length of time and managing to not concede an outrageous number of tries, I think was pretty good. So going into this game, I think keep with that same mentality, same discipline, same defence levels. With a full 15-man team, hopefully, for the full game, that would be nice to see them actually get on well against this Scotland team. So starting off in this front row, we have Fischetti in the loose head, Nicotera in the hooker position, and Casarelli, or Casacelli, or Cacelli? Cacciarelli. I've heard a couple of different pronunciations on the commentary. I've always called him Casarelli. So I'm sure someone could probably correct me if I'm terribly wrong. I try my best with pronunciations of names, but sometimes I just don't know. The uncontested scrum was very hard to judge last week about what was actually happening because of how uncontested they were. It was hard to gauge fatigue. It was actually hard for a lot of the Italian players to keep going. So hard to talk about a lot of the scrums last week, but it's a good front row. Hopefully they'll get on well against Scotland. In terms of the lock departments, Canone and Ruzza getting back in there. I think last week was the first week Ruzza didn't make it into my team of the week, but what a hard game he had. He certainly played well for a lot of the game, to be honest. But they'll try and get at this Scotland team. Scotland have a lot of jumpers in the line-out. I feel like they probably have more jumpers than the Italian team at this point, so that line-out situation could be a bit of a struggle for Italy. We'll see how they get on. In the back row, we've got Pettinelli, Lamaro as the captain, still in that number 7 shirt. Had another fantastic game last week, really difficult for him to try and judge it with. And then Halafi in that number 8 shirt, who's a good player actually. I'm really looking forward to see a bit more from him. He doesn't feel like he gets his hands on the ball a lot. He's certainly very good in terms of the breakdown and tackling zones. But I would like to see him a little bit more with the ball in hand just to see what he can do with it. But Lamaro had a hard game last week, just trying to understand what the referee was doing with his 13-man thing. You know, difficult rules to get around. It's not a rule you'll come across at all. You know, that game must be one in a couple thousand. How often that sort of thing will ever come up in a game of rugby. No wonder why a young lad like himself as a captain doesn't know that's a rule. I didn't know the rule. I've watched rugby for most of my entire life. So it'd be interesting to know how many of you guys actually knew that was a rule in last week's game. In the halfback partnership, Callum Brayley coming back in now, and Paolo Garbisi. So this will be the first week now without Stephen Varney playing, who I believe picked up a injury. I think I read a thing about it that he picked up an injury and he was going to be out for a little bit of the games. I think he's going to be out for the rest of the Six Nations. So it gives Callum Brayley a chance. Now, I like Callum Brayley, but the last couple of times I have actually seen him play in this Italian team, he has been a little bit slow and a little bit selfish. He's always looking to try and run it himself. And just the passing from the ruck felt very, very slow. Whereas Stephen Varney is all about pace. And I think sometimes can actually go too quick for this Italian team. Callum Brayley can sometimes be on the other end and can actually be a bit too slow in the Italian team. Whereas at club level, I've seen him, he's very quick. I don't know what the difference is in this Italian team. So hopefully he can keep that speed up with the rest of the players. In the centre partnership, Marine and Brex in that 12-13 combo. And they work well together, in all honesty. I thought it's a big move to drop Zanon. We also don't have Carlo Canna. You know, there's a couple of players missing from this centre partnership, but Marine actually played very, very well last week. I thought he did well, especially defensively. There's a lot of room to cover when you're down to 13 men. You've got to try and spread out wide. I thought he had a couple of really nice cover tackles, so looking forward to see him in this game. And then in the back three, we of course have Montana Ioane, Pierre Bruno, who went off so early last week. It was a shame we didn't really get to see a lot from him. And then Padovani in that fullback position, who, you know what, I think he had a good game as well. Again, more ground to cover with a winger down after the red card situation. So I think he had a good game. It's just a very difficult area to cover. Looking forward to see what Bruno does, to be fair. It's going to be interesting to watch him up against Kyle Stein, because I haven't seen a lot from Bruno in order to judge how good he is as a player. And of course, Kyle Stein is coming into this quite cold as well. So that wing can be quite a competition wing. And Darcy Graham and Ioane, both the speed players on their wing. I think there's going to be some fantastic gameplay if we get to see the ball spread out to the wing and teams don't fancy just keeping it between the forwards. We are into the final 10 now, so we need to talk about the Italian subs. In the front row, we have Bigi. Nice to see Luca Bigi back in this team. Nema coming in there, and Zalocci. So a couple of switch arounds between the hookers now. I'm not sure how bad that injury was from last week, or if the red card that happened last week also means you skip games. I can't remember who was actually playing off the top of my head. So nice to see Luca Bigi back in. That'll bring a bit of experience in that second half. I don't think that's a bad move. In the rest of our replacement forwards, we have David Sisi and Zuliani. I think Fusco... Oh, I keep getting this right. I think Fusco is actually a scrum half. My knowledge of the Italian team is a little bit off, so I'm awfully sorry, guys. There's a couple of names in here. I think Fusco is the scrum half, so I think they've gone for the 5-3 split. And then the rest of the replacements, we got Zanon is going to come on in that centre shirt. Probably at inside centre. We normally see him come on. Although maybe no, he could come on at outside centre. I'm trying to think. Zanon sometimes plays with Brex, with Carlo Canna rather. So actually, maybe he'll come on. He can cover both positions, I believe. So it'll be nice to see how he gets on there. And then finally, Angie Capuzzo. I don't know. I'm still going to butcher that lad's name. I'm awfully sorry. That's not a name I know at all, actually. That'll be interesting. That'll be a new player. I know we have a couple of Italian subs on the channel, so make sure to drop down in the comment section something about him. Something for me to keep an eye out for. So there's a couple of players that I am going to be looking out for in this game. There's one from Scotland, one from Italy that I'll be trying to keep a bit of an eye out for, just so I can try and do better for the final week's video of the Six Nations. So as we come up now towards the end of the game, we need to, of course, talk about a score prediction. Now, Scotland have been performing well at home, but being on the road has been tricky for them. So they are away against Italy. I still believe they'll be wanting to score well in this game because they need a win, but they also need to get a bonus point, really, just to try and recover a bit of their Six Nations, try and move back up the leaderboards a little bit. So they've also put out a big team. to be fair. Scotland team going into this is not a B team, which a couple of teams do against Italy. Is not put on their full team, is put on a bit of a half team. So I'm going to lean towards Scotland still, even though they're playing away against Italy. I don't think it'll be outrageous. I think it'll be actually quite a respectable score. I'm going to say Scotland to win by... I'm going to say 18. That's going to be my prediction for the game. Of course, I can be totally wrong. Of course, the score in the background. If we see a 7-0 to Italy, that'd be a fantastic victory for it. It'd be nice to see that. But of course, guys, I am but one man on the internet talking nonsense about rugby. So make sure you guys do drop down in the comments your thoughts on the game, thoughts on the players, who you think's going to do well, who you think's going to do badly, and give your own score predictions, because it's a lot of fun just to go back through the videos after the games are played, just to actually look at who actually got the closest. Of course, there's also the Fantasy League on the go as well. Make sure you're locking all that in before the kickoff on Friday. Everything moves down a day, so make sure you guys are all up to date with it. We will be doing one of these for the England and Ireland game coming up soon, so make sure you are subscribed to know when that video comes out later on today as well. I hope you've all enjoyed today, guys. I will see you all next time. Bye bye.